Have you ever witnessed something fall, not from the sky, but from someone's heart? Have you ever wondered if a single act of cruelty could be turned into a ripple of redemption? In this video, we bring you a story that begins with a fall, but doesn't end there. What if the one labeled dangerous turned out to be the most loyal soul of all? Stay until the end, because this isn't just a story. It's a powerful reminder that even broken things can shine. And if this touches your heart, don't forget to subscribe to Veil Marks. Your support helps us create deeper, better, more meaningful stories. It wasn't a bird. It wasn't a drone. It wasn't even a falling piece of rooftop debris. It was too fast, too heavy, too intentional. A blur, black as midnight and barely the size of a backpack, shot through the cold February sky like a meteor with no flame, no sound. It came from the top of a 16-story apartment building in Brooklyn, slicing through the quiet just after 2 a.m., heading straight for the street below. Jacob Thorne didn't see it at first. He had just finished wrapping up a fire inspection 3 blocks over. A faulty wiring situation that hadn't gone full blaze, just smoke and stress. He was walking toward his truck, boots crunching over icy pavement, ready to head home to his half-empty apartment and a cup of rehydrated soup. Then he felt something in the air shift, an instinct sharpened by years in the Army, then honed in the FDNY. A kind of weight, like the universe inhaling before something hit. He looked up, and the sky was falling. No time to think. No time to shout. Just movement. Jacob dropped the thermal case he was carrying, took 3 long strides forward, and threw his body toward the drop zone. His knees slammed the ground, his back jarred, his shoulder took the brunt of the fall, but his arms closed around it, around him, a puppy. It wasn't until he'd hit the pavement and felt the tremble of life against his chest that he realized what he'd caught. Not a bundle of trash, not a stuffed animal. A dog. A young Pitbull, no more than 12 weeks old, trembling in shock. His fur was coal black with a faint white line on his chest, barely visible under the smears of blood. One leg was bent at the wrong angle. His breath came shallow and uneven. But he was alive. Jacob stared at the pup in disbelief, his heartbeat thundering in his ears. His coat had shielded most of the dog from the direct impact, but he could already feel the bruises forming across his ribs. Still, he didn't let go. He tightened his arms around the tiny body and rose to his knees, checking for other wounds, for signs of internal damage. A door slammed somewhere above. Jacob's head snapped up. 16 floors above, on the roof of the towering building, a figure stepped back from the ledge. Just a shadow. Indistinct, nameless, faceless. The figure didn't look down, didn't rush, just turned and walked away like nothing had happened, as if dropping a life from the sky was nothing more than tossing out old furniture. Jacob's jaw clenched. Someone had meant for this dog to die tonight, but fate, or maybe something else, had other plans. As distant sirens wailed faintly in the background, and the city around him stayed locked in its winter slumber, Jacob stood in the middle of the empty street, holding a life that by all odds should have been broken beyond repair, but wasn't. The puppy stirred faintly, letting out the smallest, most painful whine Jacob had ever heard. It hit him harder than the fall. "Hang in there, buddy," he whispered, already turning toward the truck, his breath steaming in the air. "You're not going out like this. Not tonight." He had no idea where the pup had come from, no idea what kind of cruelty led to this. But he knew one thing. Whatever story this dog carried, it wasn't over yet. And 6 days ago, it had begun with a pair of frightened eyes, a whispered promise, and a quiet act of defiance that would lead them both here. To this fall, this rescue, and everything that would come after. 6 days earlier, Miranda Lane stood in the cold, flickering light of a Queens animal shelter, staring into a cage that didn't just hold a dog, it held something broken, something like her. She hadn't planned to be there. Her suitcase was still in the trunk of the rideshare that had dropped her off on impulse. No coat, just a threadbare hoodie and scarf that still carried the smell of turpentine and expensive cologne. Two things she swore she'd never breathe again. Oliver had made sure of that. To the public, Oliver Vance was a celebrated installation artist. Edgy, elusive, always in control of the room. To Miranda, he had been the man who curated her life like one of his exhibits. Every word, outfit, even facial expression filtered through his warped vision of perfection. At first, it felt like love. Then it became a script. Then a sentence. Then a cage. When he started destroying her lighting work during arguments, she forgave him. When he unplugged her stage designs right before a show, saying, "You should have done better anyway," she let it slide. But when he grabbed her by the neck and shoved her against the studio wall while blaming her for a critic's bad review, something inside her cracked. She left the next morning with nothing but her laptop, one change of clothes, and the key fob to a storage unit in Brooklyn where her old life waited in dust. But it was what happened after she left that led her to the shelter. A voicemail. From Oliver. "Funny thing," he had said, voice low and sharp. "That mutt you got between us last time? He left a mark. Had to get 7 stitches. The center's putting him down soon. I thought you'd want to know since you love broken things." Miranda didn't remember hailing the ride. Didn't remember walking into the shelter. Just remembered the echoing fluorescent light and the chemical smell of bleach that clung to every surface like guilt. The volunteer at the front desk was young, distracted, and almost reluctant to make eye contact. "You looking for the Pitbull?" they asked flatly, as if that question came up more than it should. When Miranda nodded, the volunteer gave her a slow once-over, then motioned toward the far back corner. Cage 19. Cole was listed as unadoptable, not because of behavior patterns or documented attacks, but because of one incident. He had bitten a man. The report said the dog lunged, drew blood, and didn't release until yanked off. But the woman in the report, the victim's girlfriend, hadn't filed a complaint. In fact, she'd vanished. And the man in the report? No charges pressed, no full name provided, only initials. O.V. Miranda's hands trembled as she approached the cage. The pit bull lay on a frayed towel, ribs visible, head low, eyes half-lidded but awake. His coat was dark charcoal with a faint streak of white between the eyes, like a lightning scar. He didn't bark, didn't even lift his head when she stopped in front of him. The volunteer followed behind her, sighing. "He's quiet now, but he gets tense when men walk by. We keep him in the back because the others bark too much around him. Staff calls him Cole, like the color. Or maybe, 'cause he's been through fire. We're supposed to put him down this weekend." "Why?" Miranda asked softly, not looking away. The volunteer hesitated. "The report says he bit the guy, but I was there that day. The guy grabbed the woman by the neck. Cole didn't lunge out of nowhere. He waited, watched, then reacted. And I swear, when she hit the ground, he laid down beside her and wouldn't move till someone came." Miranda crouched. Her hand moved slowly to the bars, trembling at first, unsure whether she wanted to touch or just witness. Cole shifted slightly, raised his head and looked at her. Their eyes met, and something happened. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just stillness. Miranda extended 2 fingers through the bar. Cole didn't flinch, didn't growl. He leaned forward slowly and pressed his forehead against her knuckles. It felt like forgiveness, or maybe just understanding. She whispered, "You saved her, didn't you?" His ears twitched. She wasn't sure if he understood, but something in his eyes said yes. "I want to adopt him," she told the volunteer. They blinked. "You sure? That's not a Yorkie you're taking home. He's got a flag on his file. We're legally required to note he's potentially dangerous. You take him, you assume the risk." Miranda didn't hesitate. "We've both been labeled more dangerous than we are." The paperwork took hours. They scanned her ID 3 times, gave her leaflets on Pitbull behavior and trauma recovery, and made her sign a waiver that read like a preemptive obituary. She signed every page without flinching. By nightfall, Cole was sitting in the passenger seat of a borrowed hatchback, wrapped in an old quilt, his head leaning toward the window, but his eyes never leaving her. She drove toward a temporary rental in Park Slope, her heart pounding with uncertainty, but not fear. Cole didn't bark, didn't whine. He sat in silence, as if he knew they were both running from something, or toward something better. In a small studio apartment lit only by string lights and a lava lamp, Miranda made up a bed for Cole out of 2 bath towels and an old pillow. When she turned off the light, he didn't whimper or pace. He curled up beside the door like a sentry and fell asleep. That night, for the first time in years, so did she. Oliver Vance never forgot pain. Not because he feared it, but because he hated when he didn't cause it first. That night in the studio had started like the others. Miranda had been quiet, distant, flicking through lighting drafts on her tablet while he paced in front of a canvas he hadn't touched in 3 days. His latest gallery debut was coming up, and the pressure had begun to eat into him like rust. Critics were already whispering that his last exhibit, Sensory Collapse, lacked cohesion. One called it emotionally sterile. Another said, Vance has lost his edge. He hated when people said he lost anything. So when Miranda had suggested gently that maybe he take a step back from the chaos and let the piece breathe, he didn't hear reason. He heard judgment. He heard failure. And Oliver didn't tolerate failure. What followed happened fast. A thrown brush, a scream. His hand clenched around her throat, pressing her back against the cold studio wall. His voice was a low hiss. I made you. Don't forget that. And then something else. Fur, heat, weight. Cole had come out of nowhere. The Pitbull launched with startling silence, jaws clamping down hard on Oliver's right forearm. The pain was white-hot, instant, and primal. Oliver had screamed, high and shrill and animal, stumbling back, trying to shake the dog off. Blood poured down his sleeve, splattered across the canvas, mixing with the streaks of failed creativity. Cole didn't growl. He didn't bark. He simply held on, unmoving, until Miranda, eyes wide in horror, managed to yell his name. Then, just like that, Cole let go. No chase, no rage, just retreat, head low, tail still, body braced like he expected punishment. But the only one punished that night was Oliver. The bite wasn't just a wound, it was a humiliation, one that cost him dearly. By the time he reached the ER, the damage was done. 8 puncture marks, tissue swelling, and most unforgivable of all, a delay. The exhibition launch he'd spent 4 months preparing for had to be canceled. The press release framed it as a personal emergency. But insiders knew, rumors spread. The photos of his bandaged arm leaked on social media. The gallery director, a woman who once swooned at his brushstrokes, pulled his funding within a week. A major corporate sponsor, citing image concerns, dissolved their contract, and the scar across his arm, raised and red like a signature in rage, would never let him forget. To Oliver, it wasn't just an attack. It was betrayal, embarrassment, a loss. And Oliver Vance didn't lose. A week later, Miranda disappeared. No goodbye, no message, just a voicemail inbox he couldn't fill with guilt or apologies or threats, no matter how many times he tried. He searched. He asked around, found out through a mutual acquaintance that she'd been seen near a shelter in Queens. That was when the idea came to him. He didn't need to find her to hurt her. He just needed to finish what he started, with the dog. Using a burner email and a fake name, he filed a complaint with the shelter, pretending to be a witness from the studio who had narrowly avoided a mauling. He described Cole as unprovoked, bloodthirsty, unstable. He submitted fake photos of the wounds, zoomed-in, color-adjusted screenshots from a movie still, claimed he feared for the safety of the neighborhood. Animal control had no choice but to flag the file. Shelters were overrun, underfunded, and always operating one bad report away from forced euthanasia. Cole was marked as a level 3 risk. His days were numbered. It should have ended there. But then Oliver heard, through a gallerist friend who kept tabs on Miranda's digital footprint, that she had adopted the dog. She'd gone back for him. Of course she had. She always gravitated toward things that were damaged, made her feel important, like she could fix them. It wasn't love, not really. It was control, the same kind of control she accused him of. That night, as Oliver stood in his loft, glass of whiskey untouched on the windowsill, staring at the scar twisting down his arm like a question mark, he made a decision, not out of rage, not even revenge, out of something colder. He picked up his phone, called a number he hadn't used since college, a man named Seth who owed him money and specialized in cleaning up inconvenient animals. The plan wasn't to kill Cole in the streets or do something grotesque. No, Oliver wanted it done in a way that made the world believe the dog simply vanished. A loose gate, a midnight escape, a tragic fall. But when Seth asked for the reason, Oliver didn't say money, didn't say liability. He simply said, "Because he made me lose. And I don't let things that make me lose walk away breathing." The call lasted less than 3 minutes, but the chill it left in the room lingered. Later that night, he scrolled through Miranda's old Instagram feed, stopping at a photo of her smiling with a flashlight in hand, covered in theater dust, captioned, "Finding the light in chaos." It made his jaw tighten. She thought she could start over, thought she could find peace with that mutt curled at her feet like some emotional support badge. Oliver knew better. He wasn't just going to take Cole away. He was going to erase him, and this time, there would be no one to bite back. Jacob Thorne wasn't used to the sound of small footsteps in his apartment. His world was built on silence, controlled, earned, and often necessary. At 44, he had grown used to the rhythm of quiet evenings, the hum of the fridge, the occasional creak of old pipes. Noise came only at work, sirens, shouts, chaos, and he left it there. Until the night Hannah arrived. It started with a phone call from Celeste, his younger sister. She was breathless, apologetic, and halfway through her night shift at the hospital when she said, "I've got no one else tonight, Jake." "Please, just until morning." Jacob had barely responded when he heard the knock on his door 10 minutes later. Hannah stood there, clutching a pink canvas backpack and a sketchbook. Her coat was too big, her hat slightly askew. Celeste gave him a quick hug, whispered, "She's quiet. Mostly keeps to herself," and then disappeared into the elevator with a wave. Jacob didn't know what to expect. He hadn't spent more than 5 minutes alone with a child in years. But Hannah didn't cry, didn't complain, didn't even ask questions. She simply walked in, sat on the couch, and began to draw. He watched her from the kitchen, arms folded across his chest, feeling vaguely like an intruder in his own home. She wasn't a loud kid, not a talker, but there was something about her stillness that struck him. It wasn't the calm of a content child. It was the stillness of someone who had learned to shrink. Later that night, he noticed what she was drawing. Wings, dog wings. Page after page in her sketchbook showed dogs. Big ones, small ones, all with wide, soft eyes and massive wings spanning across rooftops, through clouds, over cities. Some of the dogs had halos, others carried children. One was leaping through fire. Jacob said nothing, just set a cup of warm cocoa on the table next to her and nodded. Hannah blinked at him once, then gave the faintest smile, barely a shift of her lips. The next morning, Celeste returned to find her daughter asleep on the recliner, a pencil still tucked behind one ear. She pulled Jacob aside and said, "You know, she used to talk. A lot. Until last year." Jacob had known about the divorce. What he didn't know, what Celeste finally confessed in a hushed tone over coffee, was that Hannah had been the only witness to an incident. One night, her father had grabbed Celeste during an argument, pushed her hard against the kitchen counter. It didn't leave permanent marks, but it left Hannah different. "She told me something strange afterward," Celeste said. "She said a dog saved me. A huge black dog with wings. Said it came out of nowhere, knocked him off me, and then vanished." Celeste gave a weak laugh, eyes glassy. No one else saw it, obviously, but she believes it. She draws them all the time now. Angel dogs. Jacob hadn't known what to say. He didn't believe in angel dogs, but he had believed in one dog. Bear. Years ago, during his final overseas deployment, Bear had been more than a military canine. He'd been Jacob's shadow, his partner in the dark. Together they'd cleared buildings, tracked survivors, survived explosions. Bear had a streak of white across his chest like a paintbrush swipe, and a gaze that could freeze a grown man mid-lie. Bear had also been the one to push Jacob out of the way when the ceiling collapsed. Jacob got a cracked rib. Bear got buried. After that, Jacob never adopted another dog. Couldn't bring himself to try. He still kept Bear's collar in a drawer, still heard phantom paws padding across his floor some nights. But he stayed alone. And now, somehow, a quiet 9-year-old girl who spoke to winged dogs was curled up on his recliner, drawing pictures that looked an awful lot like the one he still dreamed about. Hannah came back again 3 nights later, then again the next week, and each time she grew a little less guarded. She never said much, but she began leaving her drawings on his fridge. She followed him when he prepped food in the kitchen, helped fold laundry. One evening she reached for his old firefighter badge and asked in a voice soft as breath, "Did you ever save someone?" Jacob blinked, caught off guard. He nodded. "Sometimes." "Did you ever get saved?" she asked. He didn't answer. But that night, when she fell asleep on the couch again, he opened the drawer and took out Bear's collar, held it for a long while, then quietly placed it next to her sketchbook on the coffee table. In the days that followed, he started noticing things. How Hannah flinched at raised voices in TV shows, how she froze when sirens passed outside, how her eyes would follow every stray dog they passed on the sidewalk, gaze full of silent longing. It wasn't just about art. The wings, the halos, they were her way of processing what she couldn't say out loud, of making sense of violence and survival, of believing someone, something, had protected her and her mother. That somewhere goodness had a body and fur and teeth. Jacob didn't say any of this. He wasn't good at words, but he started keeping the apartment a little warmer when Hannah came over, started cooking instead of ordering out, and every time she left he'd wait at the door a little longer than he used to, watching the elevator close like it was taking something fragile with it. He had no idea how that fragile something would soon help him heal something he thought was long buried. Because what Jacob didn't know yet was that the moment he caught that falling Pitbull on the street, the moment his arms wrapped around a broken life that had no business surviving that fall, he wasn't just catching a dog. He was catching the very creature Hannah had been drawing for over a year. And when she saw Cole for the first time, when she gasped and whispered, "That's him," Jacob wouldn't even question it, because by then he would believe her. And he'd believe in angel dogs, too. It was the kind of afternoon Brooklyn rarely gifted in early spring, sunlight slipping through the branches like soft promises, and the wind trading its bite for a whisper. Miranda stood at the edge of Riverside Park, Cole sitting patiently beside her, tethered loosely by a worn leather leash. It had been a long morning. Miranda hadn't planned to leave the apartment, but Cole had started pawing at the door, letting out soft whines, the way he did when something in his chest felt tight. She understood that feeling too well. Sometimes, fresh air wasn't a luxury. It was survival. She tugged her coat tighter and led him through the winding trails to a quieter part of the park. The fenced-in dog area was full of puppies and families, laughter, squeaky toys, the occasional bark. But as soon as she and Cole approached, the mood shifted. Parents whispered, kids paused. One mother clutched her toddler and stepped back. Miranda felt the heat of those glances. Not new, not unexpected. Cole didn't bark. He didn't even lift his head. He simply sat, ears slightly back, body still and calm, yet somehow still made people uneasy. The Pitbull label clung to him like a curse stitched in silence. She was about to turn around when she heard the soft patter of boots on gravel. A girl, maybe 9, maybe 10, stood just a few feet away. Small frame, wild curls stuffed beneath a beanie, a deep blue jacket buttoned unevenly over a polka-dot dress. Her arms were by her side, but her gaze was locked on Cole. Miranda instinctively reached for the leash. "He's friendly," she said softly, protective. "But sometimes people get nervous around him." The girl tilted her head, not in fear but in wonder. "He's not a monster," she said, barely above a whisper. "I heard him in my dream." Miranda blinked. "You... what?" The girl took another step forward and crouched. "He was in a fire," she added matter-of-factly, as if recalling a memory rather than guessing. "And he fell from the sky. But he didn't scream. He just... landed in someone's arms." Cole lifted his head. His ears twitched. His tail brushed once across the grass. He inched forward, not pulling, not leaping, just a single paw's length closer. "Hannah!" A man's voice called from across the trail. The girl looked up. "Over here!" Miranda followed the voice to a tall man walking briskly toward them. He wore an FDNY sweatshirt, his boots scuffed from real use, and a face that carried history, not in age, but in wear. She could see it in the way his shoulders squared, the way his eyes scanned the space before softening when he saw the girl. Jacob reached them and offered Miranda a nod, then looked at Cole. "He's beautiful," Jacob said. Miranda gave a guarded smile. "Most people don't use that word for him." Jacob crouched next to Hannah, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder. "You okay?" Hannah nodded. "He's the dog from my dream," she whispered, as if it were a secret only he would believe. Jacob's brow furrowed. He glanced at Miranda. "Is he a rescue?" She nodded. "From a shelter in Queens. His name's Cole." "Fell into my arms last week," Jacob said. "Literally 16 stories." Miranda's breath caught. "Wait, the video? That was... you?" Jacob nodded slowly. "I didn't realize," she murmured. "He's been through so much. I try not to make a big deal of it in public. People judge faster than they ask." "I know," Jacob said. "People hear one word, Pitbull, and forget to ask the rest." They both looked down at Cole. Hannah now sat beside him in the grass, running her fingers gently down his back. Cole didn't flinch. He leaned into her touch like it had always belonged. "She doesn't talk much," Jacob said quietly. "Not since... well, she's had her own fire to walk through." Miranda nodded. "So have I." Something passed between them. Not pity, not curiosity. Just a quiet recognition. Two people who'd learned to live among the embers. That day, they didn't exchange numbers or make promises. But as Hannah said goodbye to Cole, reluctantly, after 20 whole minutes in the dirt beside him, Jacob looked back and said, "We usually come here on Saturdays, just so you know." Miranda offered a smile. "We might be back." And they were. The next Saturday, and the one after that. It became an unspoken rhythm. Every weekend, the four of them would find the same stretch of shade beneath the maple tree near the benches. Cole would trot beside Hannah as she sketched quietly on a picnic blanket. Jacob and Miranda would talk, sometimes about work, sometimes about rescue stories, sometimes about silence itself. Miranda told Jacob about the gallery lights she once designed that shimmered like ocean waves across a museum ceiling. Jacob shared stories about Bear, the military K-9 he lost in a ceiling collapse during a rescue. Neither spoke much about the traumas behind their eyes, but their pauses were honest, and their words came without armor. One weekend, Miranda brought extra sandwiches. The next, Jacob showed up with a second thermos of coffee, just the way she liked it. Strong, no sugar. Another Saturday, Hannah handed Miranda a folded piece of paper. It was a drawing of Cole with wings, standing between a woman and a child, both of them smiling. The woman looked a lot like Miranda. "I don't believe in fate," Jacob said once, as they watched Cole chase shadows in the late afternoon sun. "But sometimes I wonder if certain things fall into our lives for a reason." Miranda watched Hannah giggle, really giggle, as Cole did a slow, clumsy roll in the grass. "Or maybe we just choose to catch them," she replied. Jacob looked at her, something unspoken in his eyes. Maybe it wasn't fate. Maybe it was just the kindness of two survivors who hadn't closed themselves off completely. Maybe the love of a dog, one scarred, silent, and impossibly loyal, was enough to build something new. Not all stories start with grand beginnings. Sometimes they start in a park, with a child whispering to a dog and two broken adults remembering how to hope. The night it happened, Brooklyn wore a strange stillness, the kind that feels staged, as if the city itself was holding its breath. Miranda had only meant to step out for 10 minutes, just a quick run to the bodega at the corner to grab milk for morning coffee. She left Cole curled up on his blanket in the living room, his favorite spot, a beam of moonlight stretched across his back. She didn't lock the deadbolt. She should have. The store was nearly empty, the streets quiet. She walked back with the small paper bag in one hand and her keys in the other. At first, she thought nothing was wrong, until she reached the apartment door. It was open, just enough to let in the cold, just enough to say something had passed through. Miranda's heart dropped into her stomach. She dropped the bag, milk crashing onto concrete, and pushed the door open with trembling hands. "Cole?" she called. Silence. The apartment was still. No signs of a struggle, no broken glass, no overturned furniture, just absence. His blanket was still there, slightly rumpled, his bowl of water untouched, but the leash, she always hung it by the door, was missing. Her breath caught in her throat. He was gone. At the same moment, across the burrow, Jacob was stepping out of the charred remains of a basement fire. His gear was heavy with smoke, ash clinging to every fold of fabric. It had been a long shift. Minor injuries, thankfully, no casualties. The crew was coiling hoses, ready to pack it in. Jacob tugged off his helmet, wiped a streak of soot from his forehead, and took a deep breath of cold air. That's when he saw it. A blur. No sound, no warning, just motion, fast, heavy, alive. Something was falling from the sky. At first he thought it was debris, maybe insulation blown loose, maybe a piece of furniture tossed by someone drunk on adrenaline. But no, this shape wasn't rigid. It wasn't spinning. It was limp. It was alive. Years of instinct took over before he could think. Jacob dropped his helmet, sprinted 2 steps forward, and dove. He hit the sidewalk shoulder first, arms outstretched, a grunt tearing from his chest as he caught the falling weight. It slammed into him with force, knocking the air from his lungs. But it didn't explode. It whimpered. Jacob looked down, stunned, breath-catching. A dog, a Pitbull, Cole. Blood streaked one hind leg. His eyes were wide, dazed, but he was breathing, barely. "Oh, God," Jacob whispered. "It's Cole." Behind him, someone shouted. A teenage bystander across the street had caught the entire thing on their phone. The video was shaky but clear. Something falling from a high-rise rooftop, a firefighter running full tilt, diving, catching the blur mid-air. A miracle. Within minutes, the clip was posted with the caption, "Firefighter catches falling Pitbull. Brooklyn miracle." It began spreading like wildfire. Inside the fire truck, Cole lay bundled in Jacob's coat, bleeding but alive. Jacob's hands shook as he cradled him, voice low and steady. "You're okay, buddy," he murmured over and over. "You held on." At the vet clinic, Ivy Calder burst into action the moment Jacob pushed through the doors. Malik, her assistant, cleared the table while Ivy snapped on gloves. Cole's breathing was shallow, but his heart was still beating. "This dog again?" Ivy asked, half shocked, half furious. "What happened?" "Someone threw him," Jacob said, jaw tight. Ivy looked at the wounds. No scrapes from climbing, no bruises from fighting. The injuries told a story of force, not accident. "He was dropped," she confirmed, her voice flat. "Deliberately." Jacob stood beside the table, fists clenched, the weight of the moment crashing down. He had seen this before, in war zones, in broken homes. The moment when cruelty stopped pretending to be anything else. Somewhere out there, someone had looked into Cole's eyes and still let go. And Jacob? He had caught him. Again. The video found Miranda before the grief did. She was curled on the edge of the couch, scrolling mindlessly, trying to quiet the ache in her chest. Cole had been missing for less than an hour, but time moved differently when panic took over. She had checked the streets, called shelters, even knocked on 2 neighbors' doors. Nothing. Then the video appeared in her feed, shared by a Brooklyn neighborhood page she didn't even remember following. Firefighter catches falling Pitbull. Brooklyn miracle. She almost didn't click, but she did. And there he was, falling. A blur of gray and white against the night, plummeting with no sound, no warning. Then, arms. A man dove forward, catching the small body like it was sacred. The phone's microphone crackled with the stunned gasp of someone behind the camera. "Oh my God, he caught it!" Miranda gasped, hand flying to her mouth. The tears came instantly, unstoppable. Cole, her Cole, the scar on his hind leg, the faint white patch beneath his left eye. It was him. She grabbed her coat, keys already in hand. The vet clinic was quiet when she arrived, but inside the lights were soft, the warmth immediate. The receptionist recognized her instantly. Her face had already appeared in a dozen comment threads, all echoing the same question. Who is the owner of the miracle dog? Ivy Calder stepped into the lobby with a clipboard and sharp, knowing eyes. "He's alive," she said gently, before Miranda could even ask. "Hurting, but alive." Miranda broke down. In the observation room, Cole lay in a blanket-wrapped bundle, one leg splinted, his face resting on a small rolled towel. His eyes fluttered open when Miranda stepped near, and a small aching sound escaped his throat. She fell to her knees beside him, whispering his name like a prayer. Jacob stood silently in the doorway, watching with arms crossed. He had cleaned the blood from his hands, but still looked like a man carrying a battle in his bones. This was the first time he'd seen her cry. The first time he saw what Cole truly meant to her. "He saved me," Miranda whispered, running her hand gently down Cole's back. "And I couldn't protect him." Jacob finally spoke. "Who did this?" Miranda hesitated. Then, as if something snapped loose, she said it aloud for the first time. "His name is Oliver." She told them everything. The control, the jealousy. The moment Cole intervened, the bite that changed everything. Jacob listened, jaw tightening. From the far corner, Hannah stood beside a crate of bandages, quiet but present. She looked at Cole with those wide, watchful eyes. Then she walked to Jacob, tugged at his sleeve, and whispered, "I know why you caught him." Jacob bent slightly, puzzled. "Because you promised," she said, "not with words, but in your heart. You said you'd never let someone in your family fall again." He didn't answer, but something inside him softened. 2 days passed. Cole began to heal. Miranda stayed close, helping Ivy at the clinic, sleeping beside her dog when allowed. Jacob returned to his shifts but came by every evening. Then, on a rainy Thursday morning, Oliver showed up at the firehouse. He looked worse than before, more frantic, more wired. A long black coat clung to him like armor, but his eyes betrayed the storm inside. "I'm here for my dog," he said flatly, ignoring Jacob's presence. "You're holding him illegally. He's dangerous." Jacob didn't flinch. "You're not his owner." Oliver sneered. "I reported him. I have the paperwork. He's flagged. The law says he should be put down." "Not anymore," Jacob said, "and not here." A silent beat passed. Then Oliver leaned closer. "She's making a mistake, you know. That woman, she doesn't know what's good for her. Never has. That dog? It's just another weapon she'll use against me." This time, he wasn't speaking to argue. He was threatening. The firehouse had cameras. The lobby had a silent alarm, and Jacob had called in a favor the moment Oliver's name came up. The police arrived 5 minutes later. They didn't need much, just a few words from Miranda, Ivy's witness statement, and Oliver's on-camera rant. Add in a history of flagged behavior and a failed restraining order, and it was enough. He was arrested on the spot, charged with trespassing, animal cruelty, and making threats. As they placed cuffs on him, Oliver shouted, "You think this ends here? You think you've won?" But no one answered him, because he was wrong. It wasn't about winning. It was about surviving and finally being believed. 6 months later, on a bright spring morning in Brooklyn, the doors of a new rescue center swung open for the first time. The sign above the entrance read, "Cole Haven, for the misunderstood and the brave." Inside, sunlight spilled across soft floors and glass-paneled enclosures. No cold cages, no barking behind bars, just space to breathe, space to heal. Every wall bore art and quotes, tributes to dogs who had survived what they never should have had to endure. And at the heart of it all was the dog who had fallen from the sky and lived to stand tall again. Cole. He walked now with the kind of quiet dignity that could only be earned. His scar had faded, but the strength in his eyes remained. He was no longer just Miranda's dog. He belonged to the mission now, to every soul who had ever been labeled dangerous for defending the ones they loved. Cole's story had inspired thousands, but it had also done something more personal. It had brought together people who believed that second chances weren't luxuries. They were rights. Miranda, Jacob, Ivy, and even young Hannah had poured their hearts into building the center. Ivy handled intake and medical care. Jacob ran logistics and safety. Miranda curated every corner with warm lighting and quiet music. And Hannah had drawn the logo, a Pitbull with soft eyes and wide wings, flying through flame, cradled in the center of a heart. The drawing now hung as a mural in the lobby, surrounded by paw prints and names, each one a survivor. Hannah had insisted the wings stay. "Because he wasn't just falling," she'd said softly. "He was flying to us." At the opening ceremony, families wandered in, curious and moved. Volunteers handed out flyers, cookies, and small magnets with Cole's paw print. Then came a moment no one forgot. A small boy, maybe 5, with tousled hair and big, wondering eyes, approached Cole slowly. He crouched in front of him, wide-eyed and awestruck, then reached out and wrapped his arms around the dog's thick neck. "Are you the angel that fell from the sky?" he asked, barely above a whisper. Cole didn't bark. He didn't wag his tail. He simply lowered his head gently, pressing it into the boy's chest with the softness of someone who understood exactly what was being asked. No answer was needed. Around them, the room fell still, and for a breath of time, love was something that didn't need language. Just presence. Just trust. Later that evening, as the last guests drifted away, Miranda stood at the door, watching the sky turn gold. Jacob stepped beside her, coffee in hand, eyes soft. You think we did enough? She asked. He nodded. It's not just about what we built. It's about what we proved. She smiled. Not every fall is the end, she whispered. Some are the beginning of the kind of love that lifts more than just hearts. It saves lives. And Cole? He sat at the door, watching the world, ready for the next one to walk in. As the sun set behind the rescue center they built from love and pain, one thing became clear. Not every fall is meant to break us. Some falls lift others. This story reminds us, in the words of Mr. Rogers, look for the helpers. You will always find people who are helping. Cole was one of them. So was Jacob. So was Miranda. And maybe, so are you. If this story moved you, please leave a comment, share your thoughts, and subscribe to Vale Marks. Reaching 1,000 subscribers would mean the world. It tells us these stories matter to someone out there. And it gives us the strength to keep going, keep creating, and keep believing that light always finds its way home.